On September 8th, 2022, the world watched as Queen Elizabeth II took her final journey through the streets of London. Millions of eyes were fixed on the solemn procession, the military precision, and the tearful faces of a grieving nation. But, hidden in plain sight, worn by members of the royal family, were messages so powerful and personal that they told stories of love, loss, and legacy that no speech could ever capture. What the cameras captured that day wasn't just a funeral. It was a secret conversation conducted through centuries-old jewelry, each piece carefully chosen to honor the Queen's memory and reveal intimate family bonds that the public rarely glimpses. From Kate Middleton's pearl earrings to Meghan Markle's understated elegance, every gemstone, every brooch, every strand of pearls carried weight far beyond their monetary value. This is the story of how royal adornments became the most eloquent speakers at the most watched funeral in modern history, and how a language older than words itself helped a family say goodbye to their beloved matriarch. The morning of September 19th, 2022, dawned gray and heavy over London, as if the very sky understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. Westminster Abbey stood like a silent sentinel, its ancient stones having witnessed the coronation of the woman who would now leave its halls for the final time. But as the world prepared to bid farewell to Queen Elizabeth II, another story was quietly taking shape behind the closed doors of royal residences across the city. Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her dressing room mirror in the early hours, her reflection showing the weight of the moment. Her lady-in-waiting had laid out several jewelry options on the velvet-lined tray, but Kate's eyes were drawn immediately to one particular pair of earrings. The Bahrain pearl drop earrings, crafted from pearls gifted to the Queen as a wedding present in 1947, seemed to catch what little light filtered through the heavy curtains. These weren't just any pearls. They had been transformed from a necklace that the Queen had cherished, worn to countless state dinners and royal occasions. When Kate had first borrowed them for Philip's funeral the year before, the Queen had smiled and told her that pearls were the perfect choice for such occasions. "They understand sorrow," the Queen had said, her voice carrying the wisdom of 7 decades on the throne. "They're born from irritation, from something that shouldn't be there, but they become beautiful, rather like grief, don't you think?" Kate fastened the earrings with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of tradition and responsibility. She had been part of the royal family for more than a decade, but this moment felt different. The Queen had been her guide, her steady presence in a world where every gesture was scrutinized, every choice analyzed. Now, wearing these precious pearls, Kate felt connected to that legacy in a way that transcended mere protocol. Meanwhile, across London, Meghan Markle was facing her own moment of reflection. The Duchess of Sussex had returned to the UK under circumstances she could never have imagined when she and Harry had stepped back from royal duties 2 years earlier. The relationship between the Sussexes and the rest of the family had been strained, marked by public interviews and private tensions that had played out in the global media. But grief, Meghan was learning, had a way of stripping away everything except what truly mattered. As she prepared for the funeral, she chose her jewelry with careful deliberation. Her selection was notably understated: simple pearl and diamond stud earrings that the Queen had given her as a wedding gift in 2018. They were modest compared to some of the grand pieces in the royal collection, but their significance was profound. The earrings represented a moment of pure joy and acceptance. On the morning after her wedding to Harry, Meghan had received a personal note from the Queen along with the jewelry box. The note, written in the Queen's careful script, had welcomed her to the family and expressed hope for their shared future. "These belong to my grandmother," the Queen had written, "and I hope they will remind you that you are loved and valued here." Now, for years later, with so much having changed between them, Meghan fastened those same earrings as a gesture of respect and remembrance. Whatever complexities existed in their relationship, the Queen had shown her kindness when it mattered most, and these earrings were Meghan's way of acknowledging that grace. The tradition of meaningful jewelry choices during times of loss wasn't new to the royal family. It stretched back generations, a silent language that allowed emotions to be expressed when words felt inadequate. Queen Victoria had popularized mourning jewelry after Prince Albert's death, and that tradition had evolved into something more subtle, but no less powerful in the modern era. Princess and the Queen's only daughter understood this language better than most. Known for her practical nature and no-nonsense approach to royal duties, and rarely displayed emotion publicly. But as she selected her jewelry for her mother's funeral, her choices revealed the depth of her feelings. She opted for a diamond and sapphire brooch that had belonged to the Queen Mother, her beloved grandmother who had lived to be 101. The brooch had been a favorite of the Queen Mother's, worn to countless family celebrations and public events. When she passed away in 2002, the Queen had inherited many of her mother's pieces, but this particular brooch held special significance. The Queen Mother had often told the story of how she had acquired it during a state visit to Australia in the 1950s, and how its deep blue sapphires reminded her of the vast Australian sky. Wearing this brooch was a way of bringing 3 generations together on this solemn day. It connected her to her grandmother's memory while honoring her mother's legacy, creating a tangible link between past and present that would help her navigate the overwhelming emotions of the day ahead. As the morning progressed, similar scenes played out in homes and palaces across London. Lady Louise Windsor, the Queen's youngest granddaughter, carefully pinned a small pearl brooch to her black coat. The piece had been a gift from her grandmother for her 18th birthday, accompanied by the advice that real pearls should be worn regularly to maintain their luster. Jewelry shouldn't sit in boxes, the Queen had told her. It should be lived in, loved in. The Duchess of Cornwall, now Queen Consort Camilla, faced perhaps the most delicate choice of all. Her relationship with the Queen had evolved significantly over the years, from initial wariness to genuine affection and respect. Camilla chose to wear the Hesse Diamond Jubilee brooch, a piece that the Queen had worn frequently, and that had become somewhat of a signature accessory for her. The brooch had an interesting history, having originally belonged to Princess Alice of the United Kingdom, Queen Victoria's daughter. It had passed through several generations before finding its way to the Queen, who had worn it to mark significant occasions throughout her reign. For Camilla to wear it now was both an honor and a responsibility, signaling her acceptance of her new role while paying tribute to the woman who had made it possible. The choices being made that morning weren't dictated by protocol or official guidance. Instead, they came from a deeper understanding of how objects could carry emotional weight, how the right piece of jewelry could serve as both armor and tribute. These women, each dealing with their own relationship to grief and loss, instinctively reached for pieces that would help them navigate the day ahead. The Queen herself had understood this power intimately. Throughout her reign, she had used jewelry as a form of silent communication, choosing pieces that sent subtle messages to those who knew how to read them. A particular brooch might signal her mood about a diplomatic meeting, or a specific necklace might honor the country she was visiting. Her collection wasn't just an accumulation of valuable objects. It was a vocabulary that she had spent 70 years learning to speak fluently. Now, as her family prepared to say goodbye, they were using that same vocabulary to honor her memory and express their own emotions. Each piece they chose was a word in a conversation that would play out silently before the eyes of billions of viewers, most of whom would never realize the deeper significance of what they were witnessing. The tradition extended beyond immediate family members to other royal women who had played important roles in the Queen's life. Sophie, Countess of Wessex, had become particularly close to the Queen in her final years, often accompanying her to events when other family members were unavailable. For the funeral, Sophie chose a necklace that the Queen had given her for her wedding to Prince Edward in 1999. The necklace featured delicate diamonds set in an elegant design that complemented rather than competed with other accessories. It had been the Queen's way of welcoming Sophie into the family, and over the years, it had become one of Sophie's most treasured pieces. Wearing it to the funeral was Sophie's way of acknowledging the special bond she had shared with her mother-in-law, a relationship that had brought both women great comfort in their later years. As these women made their final preparations, the significance of their choices began to crystallize into something larger than individual gestures of remembrance. Together, their jewelry selections were creating a collective portrait of the Queen's relationships, her generosity, and her understanding of how objects could carry love across time and space. The pearls, diamonds, sapphires, and other precious stones they wore weren't just beautiful accessories. They were repositories of memory, each one carrying stories that would otherwise be lost to time. When Kate fastened the Bahrain pearls, she wasn't just putting on earrings. She was continuing a conversation with a woman who had shaped her understanding of duty and service. When Meghan chose the gift earrings, she wasn't just accessorizing an outfit. She was acknowledging a relationship that had transcended its complications to touch something essentially human. The morning light began to strengthen as the hour of the funeral approached, and, across London, these women completed their preparations with a solemnity that matched the occasion. Each piece of jewelry they had chosen would soon be scrutinized by millions of viewers, but the real audience for their selections was much smaller and infinitely more important. They were dressing for the Queen herself, using the language she had taught them to say the things that words could never adequately express. In the quiet moments before they left their homes to join the procession, each woman took a final look in the mirror, seeing not just their own reflection, but the weight of history and tradition that they now carried forward. The jewelry they wore would serve as their silent testimony to a remarkable woman who had understood the power of symbols and had used that understanding to bridge the gap between the ancient institution of monarchy and the modern world that surrounded it. The day ahead would test their composure and their resolve, but they faced it armed with more than just protocol and training. They carried with them pieces of the Queen's own story, transformed into personal talismans that would help them navigate the most public expression of private grief that any of them had ever experienced. The ancient bells of Westminster Abbey began their solemn tolling at precisely 9:30 a.m., their deep bronze voices carrying across London and announcing to the world that the final act of Queen Elizabeth II's extraordinary life was about to begin. Inside the hallowed walls of the Abbey, where kings and queens had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years, the most carefully orchestrated event in modern British history was taking shape. As the first mourners began to arrive, the jewelry choices that had been made in private that morning started to tell their stories in public. Television cameras from around the world focused on each arrival, and while commentators spoke of protocol and precedence, a more intimate narrative was unfolding through the careful selection of precious stones and medals that adorned the grieving family. The Princess of Wales arrived with Prince William, her bearing dignified despite the evident emotion in her eyes. The Bahrain pearl drop earrings caught the subdued light filtering through the Abbey's stained glass windows, their lustrous surface reflecting not just illumination, but the weight of history they carried. These pearls had witnessed some of the Queen's most important moments, from state banquets with world leaders to quiet family celebrations that never made the newspapers. Royal jewelry expert Miranda Hollingsworth, watching from her position near the media area, immediately recognized the significance of Kate's choice. She had spent decades studying the royal collection, documenting the provenance and meaning of thousands of pieces that told the story of Britain's monarchy through precious stones and metals. In her trained eye, Kate's earrings were more than beautiful accessories. They were a direct connection to the Queen's own wedding day, when those same pearls had been gifted by the Hakim of Bahrain as a gesture of international goodwill. The transformation of those pearls from necklace to earrings spoke to the Queen's practical nature and her understanding that jewelry should evolve to serve new purposes while maintaining its essential meaning. When a necklace had been redesigned in the 1980s, the Queen had overseen every detail, ensuring that the new pieces would be both beautiful and versatile enough for future generations to wear with pride. As Kate took her seat in the front row of the Abbey, The earrings moved gently with her movements, catching light that had illuminated centuries of royal ceremonies. Other attendees who understood the significance of royal jewelry nodded slightly in appreciation, recognizing the careful thought that had gone into the selection. This was the language of the royal family at its most eloquent, using precious objects to communicate emotions too deep for words. Princess Anne entered the abbey with her characteristic military bearing, her posture reflecting decades of training in royal protocol and her own service in various military organizations. The diamond and sapphire brooch on her lapel seemed to anchor her black coat, its geometric design speaking to Anne's preference for classic, understated elegance. Those who knew the piece's history understood that, and was carrying her grandmother's memory along with her mother's, creating a bridge between three generations of royal women who had each faced their share of public scrutiny and private sorrow. The Queen Mother's brooch had originally been acquired during one of the most successful royal tours of the 20th century, when the Queen Mother and King George VI had visited Australia and New Zealand in the years following World War II. The tour had been designed to strengthen Commonwealth ties at a time when the British Empire was evolving into something new, and the enthusiastic reception they received had exceeded all expectations. The sapphires in the brooch had been particularly prized because they came from Australian mines, making them not just beautiful gems, but symbols of the connection between Britain and its former colonies. When the Queen Mother wore the piece in subsequent years, she often mentioned its Australian origins, using it as a conversation starter during diplomatic events and state functions. For Princess Anne, wearing this brooch to her mother's funeral was a way of acknowledging the Queen's own commitment to the Commonwealth, a dedication that had defined much of her reign. The Queen had visited Australia 16 times during her 70 years on the throne, more than any other country outside the United Kingdom, and her love for the Australian people had been genuinely reciprocated. The Duchess of Sussex arrived with Prince Harry, their entrance marked by a palpable tension that even the solemnity of the occasion couldn't entirely disguise. The media attention focused on their first public appearance with the royal family since their departure for California had been intense, with every gesture analyzed for signs of reconciliation or continued discord. But Meghan's jewelry choice spoke to something beyond the headlines and speculation. The pearl and diamond studs that the Queen had given her were modest by royal standards, lacking the grandeur of tiaras or the historical significance of ancient crown jewels. Yet their very simplicity made them more powerful in this context, representing a personal connection between two women who had tried to understand each other across vast differences in background and experience. The earrings had been crafted by royal jewelers specifically for Meghan's wedding gift, designed to complement her style while maintaining the classic elegance that the Queen preferred. The diamonds were particularly fine, selected for their clarity and brilliance, while the pearls had been chosen from the royal collection's extensive inventory, each one matched for size and luster with the precision that royal jewelers had perfected over generations. When the Queen had presented the earrings to Meghan, it had been during a private tea at Buckingham Palace, just days after the royal wedding that had captivated the world. The Queen had expressed her hope that Meghan would find her place within the royal family, and that these earrings would serve as a reminder of the warmth of her welcome. Now, sitting in Westminster Abbey, surrounded by the formal grandeur of a state funeral, Meghan wore those same earrings as a testament to that initial warmth, even as the relationship between the Sussexes and the rest of the family remained strained. It was a choice that spoke to the complexity of human relationships, acknowledging both the good intentions that had existed and the disappointments that had followed. Queen Consort Camilla's entrance drew particular attention from those who remembered the controversy that had once surrounded her relationship with King Charles III. Her journey from private citizen to Queen Consort had been long and often difficult, marked by public criticism and personal attacks that would have broken many people. But her selection of the Hesse diamond Jubilee brooch for the funeral demonstrated how far she had traveled on that journey. The brooch itself carried layers of history that made it particularly appropriate for this moment. Its original owner, Princess Alice of the United Kingdom, had been one of Queen Victoria's daughters who had faced her own share of personal tragedies and public challenges. Alice had lost her youngest daughter in a diphtheria outbreak that claimed several members of her family, and she had channeled her grief in a charitable work that made her beloved by the people she served. The brooch had passed through several hands before reaching Queen Elizabeth II, who had worn it frequently during the later years of her reign. It had become something of a signature piece for her, appearing in official portraits and at important state functions. The Queen's choice to wear it regularly had elevated its status within the royal collection, making it one of the pieces that would be most closely associated with her legacy. For Camilla to choose this particular brooch was both bold and appropriate, signaling her understanding of her new role while honoring the woman who had made her position possible. The Queen's acceptance of Camilla had been one of the most significant developments of her later years, representing a triumph of pragmatism and forgiveness that had helped heal old wounds within the family. The brooch's diamonds caught the light as Camilla moved through the abbey, their sparkle providing a moment of brilliance in the midst of so much darkness. Those who understood its significance saw it as a promise that the traditions and values the Queen had embodied would continue, carried forward by the woman who had once been seen as a threat to the monarchy, but who had ultimately become one of its strongest supporters. Throughout the abbey, other family members had made their own meaningful choices. Lady Louise Windsor, the Queen's youngest granddaughter, wore her grandmother's gift brooch with obvious pride, the small pearl piece speaking to the special relationship they had shared. The Queen had taken particular interest in Louise's education and development, often including her in private moments that helped the shy young woman build confidence and poise. The Countess of Wessex wore her wedding necklace with quiet dignity, its familiar weight providing comfort during an emotional day. Sophie had become one of the Queen's most trusted confidants in recent years, often accompanying her to events when other family members were unavailable. Their relationship had been built on mutual respect and genuine affection, unmarked by the complications that sometimes affected other family dynamics. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, the daughters of Prince Andrew, had chosen pieces from their own collections that reflected their grandmother's influence on their taste and style. Beatrice wore a delicate diamond necklace that had been a 21st birthday gift from the Queen, while Eugenie selected pearl earrings that echoed the choices made by other family members while maintaining her own distinctive style. The collective effect of these jewelry selections was creating a visual symphony of remembrance, each piece contributing to a larger narrative about the Queen's relationships and influence. The careful coordination wasn't the result of planning or protocol, but rather emerged from a shared understanding of how important symbols could be in expressing emotions that words couldn't adequately capture. As the service began and the ancient words of the funeral liturgy filled the abbey, these precious objects served as anchors for the family members wearing them. When grief threatened to overwhelm, when the magnitude of the moment became too much to bear, they could focus on the weight of a familiar brooch or the gentle movement of beloved earrings, finding in these tangible connections to the Queen a source of strength and comfort. The jewelry they wore also served as a bridge between the intensely personal nature of their loss and the public character of the event. While billions of people around the world watched the funeral unfold, the family's grief remained intimate and individual. But through their careful selection of meaningful pieces, they were able to share glimpses of their relationships with the Queen that transcended the formal requirements of royal protocol. The cameras captured every detail, but they couldn't convey the full significance of what they were recording. Each piece of jewelry told a story that stretched back years or even decades, representing moments of joy, celebration, guidance, and love that had shaped the lives of the women wearing them. In choosing to honor the Queen through these precious objects, they were continuing a tradition that she had both inherited and perfected, using the silent language of gems and metals to speak truths that mere words could never express. The Archbishop of Canterbury's voice resonated through Westminster Abbey as he began the ancient words that had marked the passing of monarchs for centuries. But While the formal liturgy spoke to the Queen's public role and constitutional significance, the jewelry worn by her family members continued to tell more intimate stories of personal relationships and private memories that had shaped their individual connections to the woman they were mourning. As the service progressed, the significance of these carefully chosen pieces began to reveal itself in subtle ways. When Princess and bowed her head during prayers, the light from the abbey's chandeliers caught the sapphires in her grandmother's brooch, creating tiny flashes of blue that seemed to pulse with their own inner life. The gemstones had witnessed nearly a century of royal history, from the optimistic years following World War II to the complex challenges of the modern era. The Queen Mother's brooch had been present at countless state functions, family celebrations, and moments of national crisis. It had traveled to dozens of countries as part of diplomatic missions that helped maintain Britain's relationships with allies and former colonies during a period of tremendous global change. Each time the Queen Mother wore it, she added to its story, layering new memories onto an already rich foundation of history and tradition. For Princess, and the weight of that history was both comforting and daunting. She had inherited her mother's sense of duty and dedication to public service, but she had also witnessed the personal cost that such dedication could exact. The Queen's commitment to her role had been absolute, leaving little room for the kind of private life that most people took for granted. Now, wearing her grandmother's brooch, and was acknowledging that legacy while also carrying it forward into an uncertain future. The Princess of Wales found herself repeatedly touching the Bahrain pearls, their familiar weight providing an anchor during moments when the emotion of the service threatened to overwhelm her composure. These earrings had become more than just jewelry over the years she had worn them. They had become a tangible connection to the Queen's guidance and wisdom. Kate remembered the first time she had worn them, to a state dinner early in her marriage, when she had felt overwhelmed by the grandeur and protocol surrounding royal events. The Queen had noticed her nervousness and had quietly taken her aside before the dinner began. "Those pearls have seen much worse than a nervous princess," the Queen had said with a gentle smile. "They've survived world wars, diplomatic crises, and more state dinners than anyone could count. They'll help you survive this one too." The advice had proved prophetic. Over the years, Kate had worn the earrings to increasingly important events, and each time she had felt the Queen's presence and support through them. They had become her talisman for difficult moments, a source of strength that connected her to the long line of royal women who had faced similar challenges with grace and determination. Now, sitting in Westminster Abbey as the world watched, Kate drew on that same strength. The pearls had indeed seen much worse than this, and they would help her navigate this final tribute to the woman who had given them their meaning and significance. The Duchess of Sussex remained composed throughout the service, her pearl and diamond studs catching the light as she listened to the readings and hymns that marked the Queen's final journey. The earrings were smaller and less elaborate than many of the pieces worn by other family members, but their significance was no less profound for their simplicity. Meghan had worn them to several important family events during her time as a working royal, including trooping the color and other ceremonial occasions where their classic elegance complemented the formal requirements of court dress. Each time she had worn them, she had felt the Queen's acceptance and support, even as she struggled to find her place within an institution that seemed vastly different from anything she had previously experienced. The earrings had been with her during some of her happiest moments as a royal, but they had also witnessed her growing isolation and eventual decision to step back from official duties. Their presence at the funeral represented both the good intentions that had existed at the beginning of her royal journey and the hope that understanding and reconciliation might still be possible in the future. As the service moved toward its climax, Queen Consort Camilla's Hesed diamond Jubilee brooch seemed to capture and reflect the solemnity of the moment. The piece had been chosen not just for its beauty, but for its representation of continuity and tradition, values that the Queen had embodied throughout her remarkable reign. Camilla's relationship with the Queen had evolved slowly and carefully over many years, built on mutual respect and a shared understanding of the demands and responsibilities that came with public service. The Queen had watched as Camilla gradually won public acceptance through her dedication to charitable causes and her unwavering support for King Charles III during his years as Prince of Wales. The brooch itself carried symbolic weight that extended beyond its personal significance to the royal family. Princess Alice, its original owner, had been known for her charitable work and her ability to connect with people from all walks of life. She had faced personal tragedies with remarkable resilience, channeling her grief into service to others in ways that had inspired generations of royal women who followed her example. For Camilla to wear this piece was both an honor and a responsibility, signaling her commitment to continuing the traditions of service and dedication that had defined the Queen's reign. The diamonds in the brooch had survived 2 world wars, multiple economic crises, and countless changes in society and culture, emerging each time with their brilliance intact. The Countess of Wessex sat quietly throughout the service, her wedding necklace providing a physical reminder of the day when she had officially joined the royal family and begun her own journey of service and duty. Sophie had often spoken about how the Queen had taken her under her wing, providing guidance and support as she learned to navigate the complex world of royal protocol and public expectations. The necklace had been a symbol of welcome and acceptance, carefully chosen by the Queen to complement Sophie's personal style while maintaining the elegance and sophistication expected of royal jewelry. Over the years, it had become one of Sophie's most treasured possessions, worn to mark special occasions and important family celebrations. During the Queen's final years, Sophie had become one of her most trusted companions, often accompanying her to events and spending quiet time with her when public duties were lighter. Their relationship had been marked by genuine affection and mutual respect, with the Queen appreciating Sophie's down-to-earth nature and practical approach to royal responsibilities. As the final hymn began, the voices of the congregation rose to fill the ancient abbey with music that had comforted mourners for centuries. The jewelry worn by the royal women caught and reflected the light from hundreds of candles, creating a subtle display of brilliance that seemed to honor not just the Queen's memory, but the enduring power of the traditions she had upheld. Lady Louise Windsor, the Queen's youngest granddaughter, touched her grandmother's pearl brooch as the music swelled around her. At 18, she was just beginning to understand the full significance of her royal heritage and the responsibilities that might await her in the years ahead. The small brooch represented the Queen's hope that the younger generation would carry forward the values and traditions that had sustained the monarchy through decades of change and challenge. The Queen had taken special interest in Louise's development, recognizing in her a thoughtfulness and maturity that reminded her of herself at a similar age. The pearl brooch had been given with the advice that real jewels, like real character, improved with wear and attention rather than being preserved and used in protective storage. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, sitting with their father Prince Andrew, wore their own selections of meaningful jewelry with quiet dignity. Their relationship with their grandmother had been complicated by their father's scandals and public controversies, but the Queen had maintained her affection for her granddaughters and had tried to shield them from the worst effects of the negative publicity that had surrounded their family. Beatrice's diamond necklace caught the light as she sang the familiar hymns, its sparkle providing a moment of brightness in the solemnity of the occasion. The piece had been a 21st birthday gift from a queen, marking Beatrice's transition into adulthood and her growing understanding of her place within the royal family. Eugenie's pearl earrings echoed the choices made by other family members while reflecting her own distinctive style and personality. She had always been close to her grandmother, despite the difficulties that had affected other family relationships, and her choice of pearls was a tribute to the Queen's love of this classic gem. As the service drew toward its conclusion, the collective impact of these jewelry choices began to create a visual narrative that complemented the spoken tributes and musical selections that had marked the formal ceremony. Each piece told its own story, but together they formed a tapestry of relationships and memories that captured something essential about the Queen's impact on the lives of the women who had been closest to her. The cameras recording the event captured every detail, but they couldn't convey the full emotional weight of what they were documenting. These precious objects weren't just beautiful accessories. They were repositories of love, guidance, and shared experience that connected the present moment to decades of personal history and family tradition. The Archbishop's voice rose for the final blessing, and as the congregation prepared for the moments that would follow, the jewelry worn by the royal women served as silent witnesses to a remarkable life that had touched millions of people around the world. The gems and metals that adorned them had been chosen not for their monetary value, but for their ability to carry meaning across time and space, creating connections between past and present that would endure long after the formal ceremonies had ended. In the quiet moments before the coffin began its final journey, these women found strength and comfort in the weight of their carefully chosen pieces, drawing on the memories and relationships they represented to help them navigate the most public expression of private grief that any of them had ever experienced. The jewelry they wore would serve as lasting reminders of an extraordinary woman whose influence on their lives would continue long after this final farewell. As the final notes of the last hymn faded into the stone arches of Westminster Abbey, a profound silence settled over the congregation. 2,000 mourners, including world leaders, dignitaries, and members of the public who had won places through a national ballot, sat in reverent quiet as the reality of the moment took hold. Queen Elizabeth II coffin, draped in the royal standard and topped with the imperial state crown, lay before the altar where she had been crowned 70 years earlier. The jewelry worn by the royal women seemed to take on even greater significance in this moment of transition, as the formal service gave way to the more intimate farewell that would follow. Each piece they had chosen that morning now served as a bridge between the public ceremony they had just witnessed and the private grief they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The Princess of Wales felt the weight of the Bahrain pearls as she rose with the congregation for the final procession. These earrings had been her companions through a decade of royal life, witnessing her transformation from a nervous bride to a confident future queen. They had seen her through the joy of her children's births, the challenges of public scrutiny, and the gradual acceptance of the enormous responsibility that would one day be hers. As the coffin began its slow journey down the aisle, Kate remembered the last time she had seen the Queen wearing jewelry that had once been part of the same set as these pearls. It had been at a family gathering just months before the Queen's death, when the advancing years had made formal events more challenging, but family celebrations still brought her joy. The Queen had been wearing a simple pearl necklace, and when Kate complimented her on it, the Queen had smiled and touched the stones gently. "These old friends have been with me through everything," she had said. "They've seen me through happy times and sad ones, formal occasions, and quiet evenings at home. I think they've absorbed something of all those experiences, don't you?" Now, as Kate followed the coffin through the abbey, she understood what the Queen had meant. The pearls she wore carried within them the accumulated wisdom and strength of all the women who had worn them before, creating an invisible connection that transcended time and circumstance. Princess and maintained her military bearing as she walked in the procession, but those who knew her well could see the emotion she was struggling to contain. The diamond and sapphire brooch on her coat seemed to anchor her, its familiar weight providing stability in a moment when everything else felt uncertain and strange. The brooch had been her grandmother's way of staying connected to the Commonwealth countries that had meant so much to her, and now it served a similar purpose for Anne. The Queen's dedication to the Commonwealth had been one of the defining features of her reign, and knew that this commitment would be part of her own legacy as well. She thought of the countless times she had accompanied her mother on Commonwealth visits, watching as the Queen's genuine affection for the people she met transformed formal diplomatic occasions into celebrations of shared history and mutual respect. The sapphires in the brooch had reflected the light of 100 different suns, from the Australian outback to the Caribbean islands, each time serving as a reminder of the connections that bound diverse nations together. The Duchess of Sussex walked in solemn silence, her pearl and diamond studs catching the filtered light that fell through the Abbey's ancient windows. The earrings felt different now than they had when she first received them, weighted with experiences both joyful and painful that had shaped her understanding of what it meant to be part of the royal family. Meghan reflected on the conversation she had had with the Queen when the earrings were first presented to her. They had discussed the challenges of adjusting to royal life, with the Queen sharing stories of her own early struggles with protocol and public expectations. The most important thing, the Queen had said, is to remember that behind all the ceremony and tradition, we are still just a family. These earrings are a reminder that you belong here, no matter what anyone else might say. The irony wasn't lost on Meghan that she was wearing those same earrings as she participated in what might be her last official royal event. The warmth and acceptance that the Queen had offered had been genuine, but the institution they both serve had proved more challenging than either of them had anticipated. Queen Consort Camilla moved through the procession with quiet dignity, the Hesse diamond Jubilee brooch serving as a symbol of her long journey from controversial figure to accepted member of the royal family. The brooch had been chosen not just for its beauty, but for what it represented about forgiveness, acceptance, and the possibility of redemption through dedicated service. The Queen's decision to support Camilla's eventual recognition as Queen Consort had been one of the most significant developments of her final years, representing a triumph of pragmatism and understanding over past hurts and public opinion. The brooch that Camilla wore had witnessed that gradual transformation, from early meetings marked by formality and caution to later encounters characterized by genuine warmth and mutual respect. As the procession continued, Camilla thought about the private conversations she had shared with the Queen in recent years, discussions that had revealed the older woman's wisdom and her deep understanding of human nature. The Queen had never offered explicit forgiveness for past controversies, but she had shown through her actions and her acceptance that she believed in Camilla's commitment to the crown and to her son's happiness. The Countess of Wessex found comfort in the familiar weight of her wedding necklace as she participated in this final farewell. Sophie had become one of the Queen's most trusted companions in her later years, often spending quiet hours with her when official duties were lighter and family time became more precious. The necklace had been present during many of those intimate moments, from informal family dinners to quiet evenings when the Queen would share stories of her long life and the lessons she had learned along the way. Sophie had treasured those conversations, recognizing them as a privilege that few people would ever experience. Now, as she walked through the Abbey, Sophie carried with her not just her own grief, but also the responsibility of preserving the Queen's memory and continuing the work that had been so important to her. The necklace would serve as a reminder of the guidance and wisdom the Queen had shared, helping Sophie navigate her own future role in supporting the monarchy. Lady Louise Windsor, walking with her younger brother James, touched her grandmother's pearl brooch as they moved through the Abbey. At 18, she was just beginning to understand the full complexity of her royal heritage and the choices that lay ahead of her regarding her future role in public life. The Queen had been careful not to pressure her younger grandchildren about their royal duties, but she had also made sure they understood the importance of service and dedication to something larger than themselves. The pearl brooch had been given with the understanding that Louise would make her own decisions about how to use her position and privileges. As the procession reached the Abbey doors, where the coffin would be transferred to the gun carriage for its journey through London, the jewelry worn by these women took on yet another layer of significance. They were about to step outside into the view of millions of people lining the streets, and their carefully chosen pieces would serve as visible symbols of their connection to the Queen and their commitment to honoring her memory. The transition from the intimate atmosphere of the Abbey to the public spectacle that awaited outside was jarring, but the jewelry they wore helped bridge that gap. Each piece carried private meaning that would sustain them through the public display of grief that was about to unfold. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie walked together, their grandmother's influence evident in their choice of classic, elegant pieces that reflected both their personal style and their understanding of what the occasion required. Despite the controversies that had affected their family, their love for their grandmother had never wavered, and their jewelry choices reflected that enduring affection. Beatrice's diamond necklace had been a symbol of the Queen's confidence in her granddaughter's future, given at a time when Beatrice was finding her own path through the challenges of being a minor royal in the modern era. The Queen had understood the particular difficulties faced by those who were part of the royal family, but not in line for senior roles, and she had tried to provide guidance and support as her granddaughters navigated those complexities. Eugenie's pearl earrings echoed the choices made by other family members while maintaining her own distinctive approach to royal style. She had always been grateful for her grandmother's support during difficult periods in her family's public life, and wearing pearls was her way of acknowledging that constant source of strength and understanding. As the procession prepared to leave the abbey, the collective impact of these jewelry choices became clear. Each woman had used the language of precious stones and metals to express emotions and relationships that words could never adequately capture. Their selections had created a visual symphony of remembrance that complemented the formal ceremonies while adding layers of personal meaning that only they fully understood. The gems and metals they wore had survived centuries of history, passing through the hands of royal women who had faced their own challenges and triumphs with varying degrees of success. Now these precious objects were serving their highest purpose, providing comfort and connection during humanity's most universal experience, the grief of losing someone irreplaceable. As they stepped out of Westminster Abbey and into the bright September sunlight, these women carried with them not just their own memories of the Queen, but also the accumulated history and tradition that their jewelry represented. The precious stones that adorned them had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the celebration of victories, and the mourning of losses, but they had endured through it all, continuing to serve new generations who understood their power to transform mere objects into repositories of meaning and memory. The journey ahead would take them through the streets of London, past millions of mourners who had come to pay their own respects, and, finally, to Windsor Castle, where the Queen would be laid to rest beside her beloved husband. But whatever challenges awaited them in the hours and days ahead, they faced them strengthened by the tangible connections to the past that they carried with them, transformed from private citizens into guardians of tradition through the simple act of choosing the right jewelry for the most important day of their lives. The September sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Windsor Castle as the final act of Queen Elizabeth II's remarkable life drew to its close. The private burial service at St. George's Chapel would be intimate compared to the grand spectacle at Westminster Abbey, but for the royal women who had carried their precious memories through the day in the form of carefully chosen jewelry, this moment held even greater emotional weight. The journey from London had been a pilgrimage through the heart of British history, past monuments, and landmarks that had shaped the nation the Queen had served for 7 decades. Now, as the royal family gathered in the chapel where the Queen had worshipped regularly, and where she had celebrated some of her happiest family moments, the jewelry they wore seemed to pulse with the accumulated emotion of the day. The Princess of Wales stood beside Prince William as they prepared to say their final goodbye, the Bahrain pearl drop earrings catching the soft light filtering through the chapel's medieval windows. These earrings had been her companions through the most significant moments of her royal life, and now they would witness her transition from granddaughter-in-law to future queen consort, carrying forward the lessons and values that the Queen had embodied. As the service began, Kate reflected on the profound changes that lay ahead for the royal family and for the monarchy itself. The Queen's death marked the end of an era that had spanned from the aftermath of World War II to the digital age, encompassing transformations in society, technology, and global politics that would have been unimaginable when she first took the throne. The pearls she wore carried within them the wisdom of that entire journey, from the hopeful young princess who had received them as a wedding gift to the experienced monarch who had worn them through decades of triumph and challenge. Now they would help Kate navigate her own path through the complexities of modern royal life, serving as a tangible reminder of the grace and dignity with which the Queen had handled every situation she encountered. Princess and maintained her composure throughout the service, but the diamond and sapphire brooch on her coat seemed to anchor her emotions as she prepared to bid farewell to the woman who had been both her sovereign and her mother. The dual nature of that relationship had defined much of Anne's life, creating a unique perspective on duty, service, and sacrifice that few people could fully understand. The brooch she wore had belonged to a woman who had also navigated the complexities of royal life during a period of tremendous change. The Queen Mother had lived through 2 world wars, the dissolution of the British Empire, and the transformation of the monarchy from a distant institution to a more accessible symbol of national unity and continuity. For Anne, wearing this piece was a way of connecting herself to that legacy of resilience and adaptation. She had inherited her mother's sense of duty and dedication to public service, but she had also learned to balance those obligations with her own needs and interests in ways that the Queen's generation had found more challenging. The sapphires in the brooch reflected the chapel's stained glass windows, creating tiny points of blue light that seemed to dance in the solemn atmosphere. Those same stones had witnessed the Queen Mother's own moments of grief and loss, including the death of her husband King George VI and the eventual loss of her younger daughter, Princess Margaret. The Duchess of Sussex sat quietly throughout the service, her pearl and diamond studs providing a subtle connection to the woman who had welcomed her into the royal family with such hope and optimism. The earrings had been a symbol of acceptance and belonging, given at a time when everyone believed that Meghan's arrival would bring new energy and perspective to the monarchy. The complexity of what had followed made the earrings even more poignant as memorial pieces. They represented not just the Queen's generosity, but also the difficulty of bridging different worlds and expectations, even with the best of intentions on all sides. As the service continued, Meghan found herself thinking about the conversation she had had with the Queen during their brief time working together. Despite the formal protocol that governed most of their interactions, there had been moments of genuine warmth and understanding that had given Meghan hope that she could find her place within the institution. The Queen's advice had been practical and thoughtful, drawn from decades of experience in balancing personal desires with public duty. The most important thing, she had said during one memorable conversation, is to remember that this role is bigger than any one person. We are custodians of something that belongs to the British people, and our job is to serve that trust with integrity and humility. Those words carried particular weight now, as Meghan reflected on the choices she and Harry had made, and the paths they had chosen to follow. The earrings she wore served as a reminder that the Queen's wisdom and guidance had always been offered with genuine care and concern, even when circumstances made it difficult to follow. Queen Consort Camilla found strength in the weight of the Hesse Diamond Jubilee brooch as she prepared to begin her new role as the senior female member of the royal family. The brooch represented not just her personal journey from controversial figure to accepted family member, but also the monarchy's capacity for evolution and adaptation. The piece had witnessed some of the most challenging periods in royal history, from the upheavals of 2 world wars to the social changes that had transformed British society beyond recognition. Its survival and continued beauty serve as a metaphor for the institution itself, which had endured through constant change while maintaining its essential character and purpose. For Camilla, wearing this brooch was both an honor and a responsibility. She understood that her role as queen consort would be scrutinized and analyzed in ways that would test her resilience and commitment. But she also knew that she had the Queen's blessing and the support of family that had learned to value loyalty and dedication above past controversies. The diamonds in the brooch caught the light from the chapel's candles, creating sparkles that seemed to echo the queen's own spirit and energy. Those same stones had adorned royal women through generations of triumph and tragedy, each wearer adding her own chapter to the ongoing story of the monarchy. The Countess of Wessex sat with her children, her wedding necklace serving as a reminder of the day she had officially joined the royal family and begun her own journey of service and dedication. Sophie had become one of the Queen's most trusted companions in recent years, often spending quiet hours with her when the demands of public life became less pressing. The necklace had been present during many of those precious moments, from informal family gatherings to quiet evenings when the Queen would share stories and memories that revealed her humanity beneath the formal exterior that the public usually saw. Sophie treasured those conversations, recognizing them as a privilege that few people would ever experience. Now, as she prepared to continue her royal duties without the Queen's guidance and support, Sophie drew comfort from the necklace's familiar presence. It would serve as a reminder of the lessons she had learned and the example she had been given, helping her navigate the challenges that lay ahead with the grace and dignity that the Queen had always demonstrated. Lady Louise Windsor, the Queen's youngest granddaughter, felt the weight of her grandmother's pearl brooch as she contemplated the choices that lay ahead in her own life. At 18, she was just beginning to understand the full complexity of her royal heritage and the opportunities and obligations that came with her position. The Queen had been careful not to pressure her younger grandchildren about their future roles, but she had also made sure they understood the importance of service and dedication to something larger than themselves. The pearl brooch had been given with the understanding that Louise would make her own decisions about how to use her position and privileges. As the service drew toward its conclusion, Louise thought about the conversation she had shared with her grandmother about duty, service, and the meaning of royal life. The Queen had always emphasized that being royal was not about privilege or status, but about responsibility and the opportunity to make a positive difference in other people's lives. The brooch would serve as a reminder of those lessons as Louise navigated her transition to adulthood and decided how she wanted to contribute to the family legacy that had been entrusted to her generation. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie sat together, their own selections of meaningful jewelry reflecting their grandmother's influence on their understanding of style, tradition, and the power of precious objects to carry emotional significance. Despite the controversies that had affected their family in recent years, their relationship with their grandmother had remained strong and supportive. Beatrice's diamond necklace had been a symbol of the Queen's confidence in her granddaughter's future, given at a time when Beatrice was finding her own way through the unique challenges of being a minor royal in the modern era. The Queen had understood the particular difficulties faced by those who were part of the royal family, but not in direct line for senior roles, and she had tried to provide guidance and support as her granddaughters navigated those complexities. Eugenie's pearl earrings echoed the choices made by other family members while reflecting her own distinctive approach to royal style and service. She had always been grateful for her grandmother's support during difficult periods in her family's public life, and wearing pearls was her way of acknowledging that constant source of strength and understanding. As the final prayers were spoken and the Queen's coffin was lowered into the royal vault, the jewelry worn by these women took on its ultimate significance as memorial pieces that would carry the Queen's memory forward into an uncertain future. Each gem, each precious metal setting, each carefully chosen design element had been transformed from mere ornament into a repository of love, wisdom, and shared experience. The collective impact of their choices had created a visual narrative that complemented the formal ceremonies while adding layers of personal meaning that only they could fully appreciate. Through their careful selection of meaningful pieces, they had honored the Queen's memory while also expressing their own relationships with her and their commitment to continuing the traditions she had upheld. As they prepared to leave St. George's Chapel for the last time with the Queen, these women carried with them not just their own grief, but also the accumulated history and tradition that their jewelry represented. The precious stones and metals that adorned them had survived centuries of change and challenge, and they would continue to serve future generations who understood their power to transform simple objects into bridges between past and present. The Queen's legacy would live on in many forms, from the constitutional changes she had overseen to the charitable organizations she had supported to the personal relationships she had nurtured with countless individuals around the world. But for these women who had been closest to her, that legacy was most powerfully embodied in the jewelry they wore, precious objects that had been transformed by love and memory into something far more valuable than mere gems and gold. As they left Windsor Castle that evening, each carrying her own piece of the Queen's story, they knew that they had participated in something larger than a funeral or even the end of a reign. They had witnessed and contributed to the continuation of a tradition that stretched back centuries and would continue long after they themselves were gone, carried forward by future generations who would understand, as they did now, the true power of royal adornments to speak the language of the heart when words alone proved inadequate to the task.